Thank you, Kyla. We got the dreaded call this week. Alessandra says, I got COVIDed out. She had exposure, and so she had to go into quarantine. Kyla said, hey, I'll do it. I'm in it. And so thank you, you guys, for giving us a gift this morning, music. Hey, really happy you're here. I'm Jeff, and I see some new faces. I see some returning faces back into the physical space here at Temple B'nai Tikva, and so it's great to see you, and to all those that are tuning in from your living rooms, bathrooms, bedrooms, sitting, laying in bed, who knows what you're doing, we don't want to know. But hey, glad you're tuning in anyways, regardless. Okay, so this is a time in our service where we do what we call charitable giving. And it's just really, it's our opportunity to thank all of you who give to support the work of Friends Church, who believe that the world needs a place like this to make church or spirituality available for those who, to those that don't really feel like they fit church. That is all, at least most of the people that I talk to that come in, it's me. It's Vince. It's all of us. And so this place ticks because you guys give up your hard-earned money to be able to support this thing. So I want to say thank you. And if you don't yet support us, you believe in what we're doing, you've maybe seen what we do, and you like it, you tune in on a regular basis, I want to invite you to join the ranks of those that give monthly, weekly, some do it quarterly, whatever. You can do it online, you can do it through that black box at the back here, physically drop a gift in there. You can do it through the app. There are a number of different ways. Anyways, just know that every gift, regardless of size, is very much appreciated. We like to think that we make piano wire out of pennies around here. We stretch and make our dollars stretch as far as we can to provide the services that we do. So thank you. Number of years back, we decided to do a Christmas Eve service. And that year, we went in a little bit of a different direction, a little away from the traditional sense of Christmas Eve, and focused on some of the difficult realities of Christmas, knowing that Christmas is a very tough time for many. And so that theme that year was rather dark. Remember a woman coming up to us and saying, "Don't do this. Don't do that to me. I don't come to church to feel that way. I don't like that. You left me feeling depressed and dark." And I remember at the time I got a little worked up about it. I'm like, geez, what's your problem? It's life. We all feel these things in different ways. But after the last few years, I've noticed I've got a little bit of an allergic reaction to negative people, or people who are sad. I'll lead the witness a little when I'm talking to them. I say, "Hey, you doing good? Give me the right answer here." And I don't even know I'm doing it, but I'll say, "Hey, you having a good day?" And then they're left with this difficult way of answering. It's like, "Yeah, not bad." I've done this with my wife so many times. "Hey, you doing good? You good?" To the point where she just says, "Yeah." And then I'll hear over here talking to the boys and saying, "I got this blistering migraine." And I go, "Kath, what the heck? You could have..." She goes, "Jeff, you don't want to know." There's something about people's negativity or certain emotional states I'm realizing I feel uncomfortable with. There have been times when I've cried and someone told me later, "I don't like it when you cry, Jeff. It makes me feel uncomfortable." Yeah, sorry about that. Sometimes I can't help myself. But if we start looking around, we start seeing this in a lot of places. People who say, "Hey, quit your crying. Hey, lower your voice. You calm down." There's just certain things that we react to. We're going, "No, I'm not okay with your emotional reaction." It's much easier to look at those people who are in those states and say, "Geez, what's their problem? You got to snap out of it. Suck it up. Come on, cowboy up." Whatever it is. So I've even heard people say, you know what, she's way too happy. Just drives me nuts. Comes in with all these big smiles and all. It's much more difficult to look internally and go, what is it about their emotion that I am struggling with? What is it about me? You know, science is now becoming more and more conclusive that when we block out certain emotions, when we run from, when we hide from, when we just cowboy up and we deny the honest emotions that we're experiencing in any given moment, they said it's very unhealthy. Did you know that? When you run from the emotion of others, it can be very damaging to relationships. I'm watching it with Kathy and I. I feel it at times where she's pushed herself away from me because I don't feel like I can handle the truth of what she's feeling. In 2 weeks' time, we want to talk about all of this. In exploring healthy emotion in our lives, uncovering the parts of us that may be running from certain bandwidths of emotion and what might be there. Why? And in the end, hopefully allowing us to be able to open up and explore all the real emotion that you might be experiencing, you might have experienced, you will experience, and lead to a fuller, healthier experience with others and with yourself. It's called the spirituality of emotion. Starts in 2 weeks, the week after next week. Next week's Easter. Vince and I, we're tag teaming. Next week, you're going to be in for a treat. So anyways, this series starts in 2 weeks. Invite your friends. Be a part of that, all right? Put your hands together. I know Vince, he says he doesn't like this. He does. Down deep, he loves this. Come on, let's put your hands together. Welcome the man, Vince Clausen.
Speaking of not being able to feel happy, what was that? Come on. So this next series just took tag onto Jeff. Literally an hour ago, someone was telling me a story about a movie they were watching, and it was sad. And I have my mask on so I can hide part of my face, but I'm like almost biting my tongue trying to like not change the subject or go to something different because I don't like sadness. And here's a person, almost in tears. She's tearing up, and my reaction is I want to walk away. So when we talk about the spirituality of emotions, oh, hell, people, I need this more than you all do. Today I want to start I'm going to get you into the story in a different way. When I was in university, my first year of university, I was a poor student. Poor. In my tradition, the Mennonite tradition, you eat dough. So basically I ate pancakes for breakfast, lunch, and supper, and snack. Now, there's different kind of pancakes, so you kind of spice it up with small pancakes and big pancakes. But literally, I would check my teeth every week to see if scurvy had set in yet. Like vegetables was like, oh yeah, that's funny. Who buys vegetables? Who can afford that? I can get flour and milk. So when my friend got his sister to get me a job interview, the job interview was essentially this. Could you spend a week in Toronto, all expenses paid, in a week? I was like, do they pay for food? Oh yeah, any restaurant you want to go to. I'm in. Sorry, what's the job again? Now, it was with a company called Paramount Pictures. Anyone heard of Paramount Pictures? I wasn't their leading man. I know that's where you're thinking it was going. I was the lowest of the low of marketing. And so what they did is they flew us to Toronto. It was the first time in my life I'd ever had freshly squeezed orange juice for breakfast. That is a spiritual experience. If you've never had that, spiritual. But I stayed in a hotel right on Yonge Street, right downtown. Beautiful hotel. They stamped the ashtrays with their logo. Folks, I'm from rural Manitoba. We don't have this kind of stuff. Now, the reason I tell you this story is because that was the only time I'd spent time there. And so when the news said there was a pedestrian car accident on Yonge Street in Toronto, I feel a connection to that. It's like, oh, what happened? And then I started to hear the story that you all heard. a guy rents a van and drives it down Yonge Street, but he's not driving on the street. He's driving up the sidewalk. He kills 10 people before he stops. It's one of the most tragic stories in Canadian history. Right in front of the hotel I used to stay at. Who does that? The scene ends with the van driver pulling out of his van and a cop car with Constable Ken Lamb in it. He's this first-generation Canadian. His parents are from Hong Kong. He's 42, but he looks kind of like early 30s. Handsome, clean cut. Maybe a little bigger because he's got body armor on. And he doesn't even know what's happened, but he gets a call on the radio saying, here's what's gone down. And now he steps out of his car and he sees the person who drove his van down the road, down the sidewalk, killing people in front of him. He pulls out his service revolver. The man reaches behind and says, I have a gun. Now here's what I want you to do today. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of Constable Lamb. In front of you is a man who's rented a van and drove it down the sidewalk, killing untold numbers of people. That monster is sitting in front of you, and you're pointing a gun at him. He's done everything. He said, I have a gun. He's pulled it out, pointed at you. Your life is in danger. You have every excuse to put him down. He's shown himself to be a mass murderer. So if you were Constable Ken Lamb and you had your gun pointed at this monster, what would you do? Would you pull the trigger? And today's not about capital punishment and thou shalt not kill. Because here's the deal. I think we all have monsters in our lives. Maybe not mass murderers. But how many of you have had somebody who fired you in a horrible way, or cheated on you, or betrayed you? Who treated you just in the worst possible way? Can you bring that person to mind? I'm not going to tell you the story of this person, but I have somebody in my head. Now put that face on the van driver. What do you do to the people who've broken your heart? Who've destroyed your life? Who've taken from you without any regard for you and what this will cost you? What do we do with the monsters in our lives? Oh man, that one brings the emotions up in me. When I first started looking at this message, there's actually an ancient story that I read that made me start to think, not think about this, that's the wrong word. I use the word think always, but to put this into my life. To notice how often I'm in a moment where I see someone and I'm like, you're my enemy, you're the monster, I don't like you, you hurt me. It's a story of a guy named Jacob. My dad's actually named after him. It's one of the earliest stories we have. And in these stories, this is how it works. The story never gets set up cleanly because it's not really a story like a news story. Think of it more kind of like a Greek myth. Jacob's sleeping on the ground in the desert, has a bananas dream, wakes up, and there's a guy standing next to him. And they start fighting. As we all do when we wake up in the desert after a dream and there's a guy sitting next to us, right? There's no discussion of why they're fighting. It's just like wakes up and starts pounding. And the story says they fight all night. Man against Jacob, Jacob against man. Neither can get ahead of each other. They wrestle, back and forth. Finally, the man gets in a good shot, hits Jacob in the hip, blows his hip out. Jacob holds on and won't let go. He says this, and again, it keeps going. Man, Jacob, man, Jacob, man, Jacob, man, Jacob. Jacob holds on to the man and says, I won't let you go until you bless me. It's a complex idea. The man finally does. And here's why the story relates back to Officer Lamb, relates back to us and the monsters in our lives. And this is the story that blew my mind. I read about it years ago, and I never knew what to do with it. Jacob, in the style of his people, when something profound happens, they name the place. Wouldn't that be cool if you could, you have a good experience in a city, you get to name it whatever you want? The place, I had great ribs. He names the city. Can you throw it up for me, Esmond? So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared. At any time in that story, did I say God was there? It's clear throughout the story. Jacob fights a man. Jacob fights a man. Jacob fights a man. And when Jacob thinks of the story, he says, I've seen the face of God. Now, if you grew up in the Christian tradition, or if you watched The Simpsons, can you throw the image up for me, Esmond? This is kind of the view you have of God, right? There's Adam. Are we allowed to show nudity on this stuff? Small, he's good. There's Adam, right? And then there's God, and their fingers are almost touching. And it's this idea that says God is something outside, other. And so when I tell you a story that says Jacob fought a man, but he saw God, somehow we're trying to reconcile that image, that conception of God as other, as a being outside of us. And if you've been here at Friend Church for any length of time, you know we explore much broader concepts of God than that. You see, instead of trying to figure out how Jacob saw a man and then thought he saw God, did they switch places? Was God wearing a mask? What's going on? Here's the deal. There's conceptions of God. I'm going to use it a different language because as soon as I say God, you're stuck on thanks Esmond, you nailed it. Other, that being out there. There's conceptions of divinity that say it's not something separate. Divinity is intrinsic to humanity. Divinity is part of you and part of me. What an idea, huh? Not God out there, but divinity in here. I started the first message of this series. I told you guys about the garden story. There's a bunch of different creation poems and narratives. In one of them, the character God, and I use the word character because again, as soon as I say God, you guys are back to the character God says, let's make man in our own image, in our own likeness. You see, there's this whole tradition that says each one of us is made in the image of God. There's divinity in us. Now just take a second. Picture yourself in the bathroom. You're looking in the mirror. You're looking in your eyes. Can you see divinity inside of you? Can you feel it in your heart? For me, it always feels like there's something. And the word divinity, it gets us tripped up. Common humanity, spark of the divine. We'll often use the word more than. I have an atheist friend who says, Vince, I'm an atheist, and I always answer with, yeah, so am I. Depends what kind of conception of God we're talking about here, because if it's the old man in the sky from The Simpsons, yeah, I'm an atheist too. But I said, what about that feeling like there's some connectedness between us all? Wouldn't that be beautiful? My atheist friend says the same thing I say. If that's what you mean by theist, I can do that. This sense that I am divine. There's divinity inside of me, and there's divinity inside of you. Now, we started this series talking about sin. We're not trying to define sin. We're doing what Friend Church always does. We're trying to explore different ideas around sin to challenge us. So I'm not trying to belittle any views of sin. I'm trying to widen it out. And the first view of sin, the traditional view, is this. The character God prohibits something, and then you try not to do it. Anyone grown up with that conception of... I was talking with someone recently. He said, I had a really good upbringing in the church, but I feel guilty about everything. Anyone resonate with that? I feel good about myself. Well, I probably shouldn't. I should feel guilty about that. I did something good. Well, I can't be, I'm probably bad, It's just this constant prohibition, things that I'm not supposed to do, think, believe, say, and then I just keep doing them. That's the first view of sin. And it works pretty good to control certain behaviors. But you know what? It just leaves a lot of guilt. And for me, it's not been motivating. The second view of sin says this. From the garden story, when you look at your life and you say, I am lacking something that would make me perfect. And my goal is to try to get to perfection. The belief that there's perfection to get to in the psychoanalytic tradition, that's sin. Well, that's pretty different than trying not to do bad stuff. That's all about how we think of ourselves. If we're living in this way of, I am a piece of, in traditional theology we say, we're worms and dirt. Anyone ever feel like sometimes someone thinks of you as worms and dirt? Total depravity, there's all sorts of different words. Believing that is the sin. Jeff, last week, in a beautiful message, talked about this idea from Paul Tillich that says, when there's the core of who we are, and we deny that, we separate ourselves from that, we hide that, that's the sin. When I sit in front of you guys and I try and pretend I'm not who I am, that's me sinning. Suddenly all of us who, did our hair a certain way this morning was like, was that me? Ooh. Would I say that, or would I rather say this? This week, here's the piece. This comes from the Enneagram tradition. If there's divinity, again, this is the conception from our tradition. If there's a conception that the divinity sits inside of each one of us, the sin that we're exploring this week is when we separate ourselves from that divinity. When we say, no, Vince, I can't have divinity in me. You don't know what I've done. You don't know who I am. You don't know where I've been. If you knew that, you wouldn't see the divine in me. In the Enneagram tradition, it says, when we separate ourselves from the divinity inside of us, that's the core sin. So here's what I'm going to do. Just take a deep breath if you're open to it. Take a deep breath. Settle into that feeling of there's something beautiful, divine inside of you. And according to our tradition, there's nothing you can do that earns this. There's nothing that could have happened that makes it not part of you. It doesn't matter what you've done or what you haven't done, where you've been. Inside of you, there's a light. A good, beautiful light. How does that feel? When I first started to explore this idea, be honest, it felt like putting my pants on backwards. I'd spent so much of my life in the traditional view, it was, yeah, I don't think I should be feeling good about being human. That's kind of the thing we're trying to get away from, isn't it? But our tradition also holds this idea that says each and every one of us has a core beauty that's good. I really like that view. I can also see how much of our lives is trying to separate us from that. I'm not good enough, smart enough, I've done bad things, I haven't done good things. Let's back up. I started this message with a horrible story. A guy rents a van, drives it down a sidewalk, killing 10 people, wounding 16 more. We are in the place of Constable Lamb. We have our gun out, pointed at the monster. The monster's giving us every excuse. I have a gun. I have a gun. I'm going to shoot you. But I think Constable Lamb does something now. I don't know if it's in Constable Lamb. I never got to talk to him. He wouldn't take my interview. When we can look at the world through the lens of that's a human who's done enough bad things that they're now a monster. We can do something different with that kind of a person, right? Have you ever done that? Oh, that person's an a-hole. Oh, that person's one of those people. Oh, no, they're this. What we're doing is we're slowly eroding their humanity based on an action that we don't like. Now, the van driver has done enough actions that is giving us every right to call him a monster. It's giving Constable Lamb every right to pull the trigger on his service revolver to protect us all from that person. But he doesn't. I think he sees what I'm trying to explore today. This person in front of me is not a monster. There's something divine inside of him. Now, it's way the heck down deep in there, and it's hidden by a whole lot of bad stuff. But I'm going to treat him like he holds the same spark of the divine that I hold. And in a feat of unbelievable self-control, Constable Lamb holsters his weapon. He sees that the thing the guy's pulled out from behind his back is black, but it's not a gun. He goes into his squad car and he turns off the siren to lower the energy of the moment. Even as I say this, I can feel myself doing these things and I'm just like, no, 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 no. He's a monster. Constable Lamb holsters his gun so that he doesn't have any chance to escalate this to violence. He pulls out his billy stick, you know, those like things that pop open. And he walks towards the van driver, says, on the ground, and the guy drops. He's arrested. He stands trial. He's convicted of 10 counts of first-degree murder and 16 counts of attempted murder. But the way the story goes, Constable Lamb doesn't treat him like the monster that I think he is, or that I want to think that he is. He does what Jacob does, and somehow in the eyes of that van driver, he looks deep inside of him and he sees something human. That's what's blown my mind. I was driving through downtown the other day. One way to one way, I could take a right on red. So I pull in and start to look to the other side. And just as I'm about to take off, I look up and there's a no right on red light that's turned on. So there's a city engineer paying attention to this. Can you please take that off that corner? That's ridiculous. But I'm right in the middle of the pedestrian, right? And there's 16 cars behind me that have pulled right up behind me because they're all going to do the same thing I'm going to do. This is 2 days ago. And so I'm like, oh crap, at least I didn't run the red. But I look over and there's an old dude with a cart, because there's an old folks home here, and he's walking down the sidewalk now. And I'm in the middle, so I wave right. I was like, oh dude, hey, so sorry. Like, I realize what I've done, totally my bad. And the guy walks up to my car and then just starts to curse me out. The window's up, so I can't hear everything, but he's going to town. And here's the thing. I've just worked on this message, right? See the spark of the divine in the other person. There's something there. Constable Lamb, be Constable Lamb. What do? I lose my mind at him. And he's walking around the front of my car. We're screaming at each other. How quickly, I was going to say how quickly I forget. That presupposes I got this in the first place. How easy is it for us to see the people in our lives that feel like monsters and to treat them like they're not human? How easy is it to see someone who's hurt us, who's mistreated us, who's tore our guts out as a monster? Think of social media right now. How much of social media is fired by seeing the humanity in a person on the other side of that screen? You're a monster. You're a bigot. You're an a-hole. And I will treat you like you're a monster, not like a human. And the thing I want to leave us with today, and I say us very specifically because this is not my area of strength, is to be inspired by this view of sin. Not that I did something wrong. Me getting mad at that guy, that wasn't the issue. Sometimes you need to have words with people. You need to explain to them what they did wrong. Don't be laughing. I got a great story about that, but I'll tell you guys that one another day. No, it's to dehumanize someone because of what they did, so I can treat them like a monster, instead of doing the hard work of seeing the divine spark that's in them and in me. So here's what I want to leave you with today. As you go out from here, even right now, if you're sitting next to somebody, if you're not, just look to the side of somebody. Just look at them for a quick second. Don't creep them out. Don't be eyeballing them. If you don't have anyone, just look at me. See the divinity in that person. See them as a being that nothing they can do or say or not do, it won't go away. It doesn't matter how many prohibitions they've transgressed, how many mistakes they've made, how many dumb things they've done. There's still something of value in them. just makes my heart. Now, if you're like me, there's an objection that comes up. Wait a second. So that means I got to let people do whatever they want? Right? They have the spark of the divine, I have the spark of the divine, so they just get to trample on me? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. The van driver was still arrested. He's been incarcerated for the last 2 years. Chances are he will be getting 10 life sentences. I don't actually know what that means, but chances are he'll never see the light of day. And I'm okay with that. His actions need to be dealt with appropriately. But Constable Lamb treated him like there's something of value in him. And if Constable Lamb can treat that guy like there's something of value, I think we all can do amazing things, show amazing love to the people around us, even while holding our boundaries, while maybe disconnecting ourselves from people, while holding people responsible for their actions. It's not what we do, it's how we do it. We do it with love. Hey Dad, if you're listening, sorry I didn't ask if I could tell this story, but I'm going to tell it anyways. My dad, I think, understood some of this. When we were kids, we weren't the greatest kids. There was a lot of prohibitions that I broke. But every time, and I grew up in the era of corporal punishment, so we got the strap. But every time I got the strap for doing something I wasn't supposed to do, by the end of the time my dad was spanking us, he would be in tears. He had to hold us responsible for what we did. But he also treated us like human beings. That's the spirit I want us to leave with today. Like Constable Lamb. Like Jacob in the Bible, seeing God in every single person we meet. May we leave here today treating people with love and seeing their divine spark inside of them. That's where I'll leave it. Amen. Have a great week, everybody. Next week's Easter. It's going to be a good one, the final view of sin. This series has probably stretched me more than a lot of series have. I don't know where it's been for you, but I would encourage you to come out and experience it with us together. Have a great day. See ya.
Baby, when you come by, you can have yourself a